I do love the Olympics. It's an exciting time. I love watching the Olympics. And it's kind of just a fun part of life in our world. But in case you hadn't noticed, the world is a terrible place. We live in a time when God's people are suffering greatly. In Nigeria, radical Muslims groups regularly invade villages in the northern part of Nigeria and kill Christians, men, women, children. In North Korea, even the mention of God will have your entire family shipped off to a concentration camp. Christians in North Korea are sent to prison and labor camps where they're starved, overworked, and tortured. The government requires that all North Koreans act as informants, and that applies even to families. And even at a young age, children are taught to spy on their parents. In Eritrea, which is in Eastern Africa, a very closed-off country, Christians are imprisoned in metal shipping containers out in the desert. In China, there's been an increasing crackdown on Christians, and access to the Bible is being cut off. More Christians were killed in the 20th century for their faith in Jesus than all other centuries combined. We also live in a time of great suffering. Estimates tell us that there are more people in slavery today around the world than at any point in human history, with approximately 50 million people who are trapped in either forced labor or forced marriages, debt bondage, human trafficking, all sorts of evils. The World Health Organization estimates that nearly 1 in 4 people around the world do not have access to safe drinking water, something that we just take for granted every single day. We don't worry that the water we're coming out of our faucets will kill us. We don't have to try to cover our mouths when we shower. 1 in 4 people, that's 2.1 billion people who do not have access to clean drinking water. It's one of the world's biggest health problems, and it's also a leading cause of death. Over 1 million people die every year because they simply don't have clean drinking water. And many of those who die are children. In contrast, that need, and we can solve that, right? Like we can dig wells, we can set up water for purification plants if we have the funds, but we don't. In contrast, consider this, that in a single day, for a single sporting event, a one-day sporting event, the 2026 Super Bowl, Americans, just Americans, they wagered $1.76 billion in sports gambling for a one-day sporting event, while 1 million people will die because they don't have clean drinking water. Our world is a place of suffering, of injustice, of persecution, of depravity. And it's not unlike that, the world of the time of Esther. The world was a dark place at the time of Esther. The opening chapter of Esther points a picture of corruption and depravity and just an empire, a godless empire, reveling, partying in their own glory and in their own excess. It was an empire that was rich and powerful and corrupt and domineering. It's not exactly an encouraging picture, but it's also not so different than our world today. But this can actually encourage us, because the same God that worked in the time of Esther is the same God who is working today, who is working all things for our good and for His glory. The big idea as we begin our study in the book of Esther is to pursue God's glory, not your own. Pursue God's glory, not your own. You'll see that's the exact opposite of what was happening in the opening section of Esther. The story of Esther opens with a party scene. And I think I can say this is a party scene unlike anyone you and I have ever seen before. A bigger party than you or I have ever seen. And it was not a godly one. Esther chapter 1 begins. Now in the days of Ahasuerus, the Ahasuerus who reigned from India to Ethiopia in over 127 provinces. In those days, when King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne in Susa, the capital, the citadel, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a feast for all his officials and servants. The army of Persia and Media and the nobles and governors of the provinces were before him. while he showed the riches of his royal glory and the splendor and pomp of his greatness for many days. 180 days. So this is a party with a lot of people. The army of Persia and Media, all his governors, his nobles, they're all there. And so it's a lot of people, and it's for a really long period of time. 180-day party. Has anybody been to a 180-day party before? Okay, I have not been to 180, no. And when these days were completed, as if that wasn't enough, the king gave for all the people present in Susa, the citadel, both great and small, a feast lasting for 7 days. I guess this is like the encore performance here. For 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace. And notice how elaborate and luxurious and opulent this was. There were white cotton curtains and violet hangings fastened with cords of fine linen and purple to silver rods and marble pillars, and also couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and precious stones. This is no cement sidewalk you're walking on. This is a mosaic of precious stones that you're just walking on as pavement as you make your way to your gold or silver couch to sit on, lay on. Drinks were served in golden vessels of different kinds. So these aren't some sort of mass-produced goblets. Like these are custom-designed golden goblets that people are drinking from. Drinks were served in golden vessels of different kinds, and the royal wine was lavished according to the bounty of the king. So there was a lot of wine, there was a lot of drinking. And drinking was according to this edict. There is no compulsion. And what that means is that at that time, the law was that if the king drinks, you got to drink. And the king was setting that aside. How generous of this king. Hey, you don't have to take a drink every time I take a drink. Doesn't that sound like a society with lots of freedom and liberty, that when the king is deciding, is dictating when you drink or don't drink? This was not a democracy these people lived in. For the king had given orders to all the staff of his palace to do as each man desired. Queen Vashti also gave a feast for the women in the palace that belonged to King Ahasuerus. This is a picture of decadence and depravity, and it's going to go from bad to worse, as we're going to see next week as we get into the next section. But there's several applications, 3 actually, that we can learn from this passage. Number 1, glory in God, not yourself. Glory in God, not yourself. I know several of you have interest in the archaeology behind Esther, and I'll try to bring some of that out in the days ahead as we go through this book. But thanks to the French archaeologists, the setting of Susa is well known. This is modern-day Iran. Susa is real. This king is real. We know about him from other sources outside the Bible. Particularly the Greek historian Herodotus records some important details about King Ahasuerus. We found the palace there. The ruins of the palace have been unearthed in Susa. And what I want you to see is that what's the point of this feast? This was not a goodwill feast of like, hey, let me just bless everybody. I just want to feed people and let people enjoy life in our kingdom. No, the point of this 180-day festival of party that involved, so many people. It was a pompous act of royal self-display. It was to put on display, look how great a king I am. Look how great our empire is. Look how wealthy and powerful I am. This was all about the glory of King Ahasuerus. And how decadent, how depraved to consider that the government at this time of one of the largest kingdoms imaginable, what are they doing for 180 days? They're just partying. This is a picture of decadence and depravity. But contrast that 180-day celebration to their own glory, to the king's own glory. Contrast that. How long will the celebration of God's glory go on? Forever. There's other things we can think about from this passage. I don't know if you're aware, February 12th, 2014, something happened remarkable. So Bowling Green, Kentucky is the headquarters of the Corvette Museum, the National Corvette Museum. And on February 12th, 2014, a massive sinkhole opened up inside the museum, and 8 of their prize Corvettes fell into this sinkhole. And 3 of them, they were able to pull all 8 out. 3 of them they were able to restore, but 5 of them were so badly damaged that they were ruined. They could not be restored. And what's ironic about that is, what is the purpose of a museum? It's to preserve things, right? And so here at the museum, these prize cars that were probably worth a lot of money were destroyed. They weren't preserved. And it's just a picture of, like, they actually have a display about this now. They've got a huge influx of tourists who came to the museum as a result of the sinkhole, and they actually have a display. They put out a display up about it. But what they didn't say on the display, which they should have, is, hey, on February 12th, the sinkhole got 8 of our cars, and one day they're all going to be gone. Nothing lasts. How much does King Ahasuerus own today? Nothing. It's all gone. I mean, we got some stone that's left over of the palace. We can say, yeah, here's where the palace was. But these goblets of gold, gone. This beautiful mosaic they walked on, gone. The couches of gold and silver, gone. I mean, I don't know. You can look at Savers and see maybe a few of them have made it way to the but they're gone. And all of this is a reminder that our riches are down here are temporary, our lives down here are very short, and God alone is the one who is worthy of glory, honor, and praise. Or in the words of the vision we talked about back in January, Soli Deo Gloria. To God alone be the glory. In contrast to what we are seeing on display here in Esther, we are called to acknowledge that we are not great. Earthly kingdoms are not great. God and God alone is great. And church, may we resolve to fight against this temptation, because as much as we can be appalled or shocked by King Ahasuerus and his pompous, prideful display of his wealth and power, and look at that and we can say, well, so arrogant. Doesn't that same temptation live in us? Aren't we tempted to, maybe name drop or tell people about something great we did, or to show off something we own or have or have done? We're not different. We're just not as rich as Ahasuerus was. But the same seed of depravity that was in him is in all of us. We are all tempted to glorify ourselves. We live in a society, I think, that is becoming more and more narcissist. And we make it about ourselves. And we need to resolve as a redeemed people of God. Let us resolve, church, to fight against this temptation, to recognize that this is a temptation. We're not immune from this. To recognize this temptation and to fight against it, and to instead give glory to the one who truly deserves it. This is the second application I see in this passage, and it's to guard against greed. Guard against greed. Hopefully just this summary, this lavish description of the wealth and power of King Ahasuerus. I had to practice saying that name a lot, just so you know. Like that. Okay, so I'm not here to boast. Okay, sorry. Anyway, guard against greed. So this King Ahasuerus, he's putting on display here all his wealth. And this territory that, when it says from, that it's describing from India to Kush, so that is from southern Pakistan to all the way to northern Sudan in terms of modern geography. So even by today's standard, this is a huge territory. This is a huge empire that he's ruling over. It was the greatest empire to date at that time. So the man is uber wealthy, he's uber powerful, and it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. Because you know what he would do after chapter 1 takes place? He invaded Greece. He wanted more. He wanted to take Greece, which, by the way, he failed to do, which the Greek historian was very happy to record and celebrate. I wonder if Ahasuerus had bought into that wicked lie that I am what I have. That my worth is based on how wealthy I am. That's a lie. It is not based. Our worth is not based on what we have. And again, the same greed that we see on display in Ahasuerus, does not that same seed lie in our own hearts? Jesus warned us, take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And he told them a parable saying, the land of a rich man produced plentifully, and he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you. And the things that you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. Paul exhorts us in 1 Timothy 6, but godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into the world and we cannot take anything out of the world. You and I did not pop out of our mothers with a suitcase of belongings. And when they bury us, we won't be taking one with us either. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. John D. Rockefeller was one of the richest men probably in the history of the world. And at one point, so this uber rich guy in his time period, he was asked, how much is enough? How much money is enough? And Rockefeller's quote is so stunning. His response was, just a little bit more. One of the richest men in the world. Wasn't enough. Don't scoff at this, church. We are all tempted to greed. We are all tempted to find our life and identity in our possessions. We're all tempted to love things more than we love God. And you know what the cure to that is? It's giving. Giving is an antidote to the heart of greed. But let me be really clear as this. We don't give because God is somehow puny or needy. Like, we don't give as like, oh, I'm making God, I'm giving God some resources because he needs a helping hand. No, we don't. God says in Job 41:11, who has first given to me that I should repay him? Whatever is under the whole heaven is mine. It's already his. He just entrusted to you to be a steward for a little while. And you will give an account for that. But when we give, we are guarding our hearts against greed. Generous giving is something that we need. It's an act of worship, and it's something we do to guard against greed. Glorifying God and guarding against greed are not the only applications I see in this passage. There's one more important one that I want to share with you this morning, and it's this: trust God in the dark. Trust God in the dark. Esther reminds us that we live in a dark time of evil and injustice, just like she did, and that there's times in life when evil and injustice seem to be winning. And walking by faith means learning to trust God in the dark when we cannot see. Even when you don't feel him, even when you don't see him, even when you cannot discern how he is working, he is there. Romans 8:28 says, and we know that those who love God, for those who love God, all things work together for good. Church, there's going to be moments, maybe some of you are right there now. You're in the valley, you're in the darkness. You don't feel him, you don't see him. And if you're not there, there's probably going to come a time when you are there. And there's these moments where all we have is a scripture verse on a page that we are clinging to. And Esther's a reminder. May Esther strengthen our faith, so that even when we don't feel Him or see Him, to cling to that promise in the dark. How has God spoken to you this morning? Our worship team is going to come forward. They're going to give us just a few moments to reflect on what we've heard. This is your time to do business with God, to respond to however He's spoken to you, whether through Veronica's testimony or through Esther, through a song we've sung. How has God spoken to you today? Respond to that. The dark times of Esther were not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. We're still in chapter 1. And it's against this bleak, depressing backdrop that God is going to write an amazing story that will showcase His faithfulness and His sovereignty. The darkness of our world today is not the end of the story either. God is still at work among us. We may be dismayed, we may be grieved, we may suffer for a season, and it's right to lament. But Esther throws us a lifeline to pull us from the depths of despair. It teaches us, trust God in the dark.